Axis tank commanders in Libya in early 1940, one believed their armor was impervious to anything the British could field in the harsh deserts. They were wrong. On the outskirts of Tobruk, at precisely 14:30 hours on May 27, 1941, 3 German Panzer IV tanks of the 15th Panzer Division were hit and disabled, not by concentrated anti-tank fire or mines, but by a technology they had never encountered. The attackers risked no infantry in the open. Instead, an unseen hand operated a remote device, delivering destruction directly beneath the armored hulls. British engineers, working under the Special Operations Executive, had created a solution that defied established orthodoxy. The wireless control vehicle, no larger than a child's toy car, but carrying 50 pounds of TNT, moved, via remote control, up to 400 yards from Allied positions. Protected by sand drifts and careful camouflage, British operators maneuvered these tracked platforms against Axis supply convoys and armor. On May 27, 1941, 2 transport trucks and 3 tanks were disabled within less than 6 minutes, with Axis crews responding in confusion and panic. Allied casualties were minimal, just 1 light wound reported from a British technician during setup. The Afrika Korps expected open desert warfare conducted with tanks, artillery, and infantry. Instead, their armored columns faced explosive devices they could neither see nor counter in the critical moments before impact. This technological surprise upended their calculations and disrupted vital supply lines near Tobruk. In this opening, the full details of how underdog engineers leveraged simple components and secrecy against formidable armored forces are revealed. May 27, 1941, 6:30 hours. Lieutenant Colonel Basil William Robinson of the Special Operations Executive initiated a covert equipment deployment near Bir el-Gubai, precisely 18 kilometers south-southwest of Tobruk on the Libyan front. Lieutenant Colonel Robinson's orders specified the use of 3 wireless control vehicles carrying 50 pounds of TNT each, supported by a detachment of 8 men from the Royal Engineers, equipped with No. 18 radio sets, 2 Bedford OYD support trucks, and 1 Vickers machine gun section. Their objective: disrupt German armored and supply movements along the primary Axis convoy route toward Tobruk. On the opposing side, General Erwin Rommel commanded 134 tanks, 84 Panzer III and 50 Panzer IV of the 15th Panzer Division, positioned in forward deployment zones between Gazala and the approaches to Tobruk. Their line included 488 Flak 36 anti-tank guns, armored troop transports, and entrenched infantry sections from Schutzen Regiment 104. The Panzer IVs featured frontal armor of 50 thickness and mounted short-barreled 75 kW K37L24 cannons, with radio command links coordinating through Enigma-encrypted channels. British command expected to inflict maximum material damage on supply and armor units with minimal risk to personnel, leveraging technical surprise. Previous intelligence from Ultra decrypts indicated Axis reliance on predictable convoy timing between 1100 and 1430 hours daily. British wireless interception confirmed convoys maintained spacing of over 200 meters between vehicles, offering clear engagement intervals for remote-controlled devices. However, the Axis underestimated unconventional Allied tactics and the reach of wireless-controlled ordnance on open terrain. Reconnaissance flights by No. 208 Squadron RAF on May 25 identified unusually low sand cover at Wadi El Amr, allowing improved line-of-sight control but increasing risk of vehicle detection before attack initiation. Daytime surface temperatures measured 36 degrees C, and ground humidity was 18%, risking mechanical overheating of Allied electronics. What happened in the next 12 hours would determine whether the British could delay Axis supply and armor reinforcement to the Tobruk perimeter. At 13:20 hours, the first wireless control vehicle was deployed from a foxhole position 270 meters southeast of the Axis supply road. Royal Engineers Section B, consisting of 3 men under Sergeant Arthur Collins, activated the radio guidance unit and checked signal integrity via No. 18 set using the prearranged authentication code. Each operator wore headsets connected to portable receivers and visually tracked the vehicle's path. The immediate terrain consisted of flat sand interspersed with shallow wadi, measuring 1.7 meters deep and 6 meters across at the target crossing. By 1350 hours, Oberleutnant Heinrich Lenz positioned an 88 Flak 36 anti-tank gun at grid reference 32 degrees 07 N, 23 degrees 57 E, with effective range of 2,000 meters and a firing rate of up to 20 rounds per minute. Panzer III units remained on reserve behind an anti-tank ditch, relying on sand camouflage and hull-down positions. By 14:05 hours, the wireless control vehicle had advanced undetected to within 9 meters of the nearest Panzer IV, its electric motor nearly silent beneath open hatches. German crews noted only mild vibration across their hulls. At 14:17 hours, Captain John Stratton, Royal Signals Intelligence, intercepted an Axis radio transmission from Major Kurt Burham in Gazala. Unidentified mechanical noise possible mine clearance advise caution. This indicated partial Axis suspicion, but not full awareness of remote-operated ordnance. At 14:26 hours, Feldfunker Otto Kremer, the 15th Panzer Division's radio operator at the forward command post, reported to Division HQ. Explosion in Sector G5 combat alarms activated. Wind speed measured 18 kph, visibility at 4,500 meters, and local temperature at 35 degrees C, intensifying fire and smoke after the detonation. At 14:30 hours, the wireless control vehicle delivered its payload. The electric charge triggered 50 pounds of TNT beneath the Panzer IV at a distance of less than 2.5 meters, penetrating the 50m lower glacis plate. Lieutenant Colonel Robinson ordered Section B to advance on both enemy trucks under secondary operational control. By 14:38 hours, 3 tanks and 2 trucks were disabled. Panic had spread among Axis forces, and the tactical landscape on the Tobruk approach shifted dramatically. But at 14:41 hours, with desert dust clouds obscuring lines of sight, a new German countermeasure began that would prove decisive. At 14:42 hours, Sergeant Arthur Collins of the Royal Engineers Section monitored the signal strength indicator on his No. 18 set as the dust from the earlier detonations began to settle. Suddenly, the signal dropped from 7 to just 2 strength bars across all 3 wireless control vehicles within 30 seconds. Technicians checked the rooftop whip antennas for visible damage, but found none. Cross-checks with backup receivers and a bench-tested transmitter confirmed a synchronized signal fade affecting a 600-meter wide sector. By 14:45, Section B logged signal disruption on all operational frequencies for wireless vehicle control. In tactical terms, this presented a critical vulnerability. British expectations were based on the wireless controls functioning at a reliable 400-yard range with nominal 5 to 7 signal bars. Here, a rapid signal fade to 2 or fewer bars meant vehicles became unresponsive at less than half their rated operational distance. Compared to pre-battle trials conducted at Sidi Bishr, 21 kilometers east of Alexandria, signal consistency had never dropped below 5 bars, even under moderate radio interference. Lieutenant Colonel Robinson ordered immediate reporting to adjacent Royal Engineers sections via field telephone for redundancy. On the Allied side, Captain John Stratton of Royal Signals Intelligence immediately recognized the new interference as deliberate Axis jamming rather than anomalous environmental fluctuation. The British had, moments before, successfully neutralized 5 enemy vehicles and forced a dispersal of Axis transport columns. This technical setback jeopardized ongoing attacks on a second inbound Axis supply convoy, as remote devices could no longer be steered effectively beyond 200 meters. Royal Engineers rapidly shifted tactics, preparing for manual explosive placement under cover of darkness, and repositioned the Vickers section to maintain suppression on the compromised approach. For the Axis, Hauptmann Dieter Voss of the 15th Panzer Division's Nachrichtentruppen, utilizing a Kleinfunksprecher D2 radio and 2 Siemens short-range transmitters, initiated a 60-watt broadband noise jammer at precisely 14:41 hours. German technical notes later recorded that their jamming cycle saturated the 6.3 meter and 7.1 meter operating bands used by British control sets. Initial confusion gave way to partial recovery of command, as radios once again allowed divisional coordination. However, German radio logs from Feldfunker Otto Kremer show a 9-minute blackout where standard tactical reporting was disrupted for multiple units in the western sector. By 14:49 hours, radio signal failures and jamming effects had been recorded at the main British command post, as well as forward positions near Wadi El Amr and South Ridge, impacting at least 9 British Units 3 engineer teams and 6 support sections. Axis positions at grid reference 32°07 N, 23°57 E recovered partial radio contact. German defensive coordination, severely disrupted moments earlier, was only partially restored. Local command cohesion relied mainly on prearranged colored smoke signals and messenger movement, as wireless traffic was unreliable for the remainder of the engagement. The Wireless Control Vehicle Mark II was designed to operate in open desert conditions at distances up to 400 yards using the number 18 set radio, transmitting at 6.2 to 2 MHz and rated for 5 watts output. Its primary receiver unit utilized superheterodyne architecture, robust against casual interference, rated at 7 dB SNR minimum in field conditions. However, the German-supplied Kleinfunksprecher D2 jammer, outputting 60 watts over broad overlapping bands, induced high-amplitude noise exceeding 13 dB at 300 meters, overwhelming the British receiver's signal discrimination. When the jammer was activated, the vehicle's onboard relay circuits became unresponsive within a 220 to 240 meter range well, inside the expected remote operational envelope. British testing at City Bisher Signals and Electrical School. February 1940, one had not included comprehensive spectrum jamming scenarios, so failure modes and fallback procedures for high-power local interference remained unvalidated. Additional contributing factors included the high ambient temperature, up to 36 degrees C, which degraded receiver capacitor tolerances, early battery drain under load, and dust infiltration into relay contacts, as documented in post-action reports. The decision to restage Section B for forward remote attacks was made by Lieutenant Colonel Robinson at precisely 14:08 hours, based on a decrypted Ultra report indicating Axis supply traffic would peak between 14:20 and 14:45 hours. This intelligence, code XKG/9/1941, underestimated Axis WWII electronic warfare capability. A comparison with the December 1940 Bardia raid shows a key difference. At Bardia, British remote demolition units faced only sporadic Italian signal countermeasures, never exceeding 12 watts output, allowing near-total operational control within 350 meters. Here, the sudden use of 60-watt German jammers cut effective remote engagement range by 60% and reduced operational tempo across a wider area than prescribed in SOE Manual Q 9435-41, which assumed only passive interference. Captured 15th Panzer Nachrichtentruppen orders later revealed priority to wireless jamming on enemy motorized control frequencies from 1440 hours, and Hauptmann Voss's log, Bundesarchiv, RL 544, p. 117 states, denial of enemy remote direction for 9+ minutes, achieved by full band saturation. Post-battle interrogation of Voss by Major Gerald Outwait confirmed the use of D2 units at 400-meter intervals. Action reports recorded 43% fewer effective remote detonations than projected. British after-action notes, Pro WO 201-1472 state, WWII attack cut control range by over half, halting 3/4 of remaining sorties. The Royal Engineers Section B, under Sergeant Arthur Collins, shifted to manual sabotage operations at 15:02 hours, as remote vehicle control remained compromised. Within 20 minutes, effective engagement distance for their ordnance shrank from 400 meters pre-jamming to just 110 meters post-jamming. 2 British sappers from support section sustained light wounds while advancing under fire, as they attempted to deploy explosives by hand along the northwest convoy route. This transition enabled a small-scale but critical attack on a stalled German supply truck at 15:17 hours, which detonated after a manual charge was set beneath its axle. Meanwhile, the Vickers machine gun section redirected fire from their original flank covering position to suppress a suspected enemy jamming vehicle, spotted at grid 32°08'N, 23°58'E. Lieutenant Colonel Robinson, at the rear forward command post, received the jamming effect report at 15:09 hours and ordered all Royal Engineer assault sections to halt remote operations north of Wadi El Amr. Instead, teams were directed to reconcentrate south for smaller sabotage missions and deploy 2 redundant field telephones for secure local command. This alteration required hasty field splicing of 440 meters of cable and battery relay installation to compensate for lost radio communication to unit headquarters. Captain Stratton's Royal Signals section adapted their wireless schedule to shorter, 8-second bursts at variable frequencies, hoping to evade ongoing German U attacks. By 15:40 hours, only 3 additional Axis vehicles were disabled, compared to the 10 projected prior to the jamming episode. The British demolition teams advanced toward the Tobruk perimeter fell behind schedule by 2 hours, delaying planned coordination with 8th Army units. Wounded rates rose from the originally projected 7% to 13% due to increased exposure during manual placement. Post-action estimates determined that successful jamming saved an estimated 5 Axis vehicles and 18 to 24 personnel from destruction, while costing the Allies 2 wounded and a half-day operational delay. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1994 revealed a first-hand diary entry by Sergeant Arthur Collins, Royal Engineers Section B, describing the pivotal moment wireless control failed on May 27, 1941. Collins wrote, "Signal bars dropped to 2 vehicles unresponsive, sand and heat everywhere, sudden confusion, had to signal fallback by flare." This account directly contradicted the SOE's official training manual, which claimed no 18 sets would maintain control to 400 yards without interference. Censorship and classification of after-action reports during wartime masked the discrepancy. This detail remained unknown until Collins's diary was released by the National Army Museum Archive in 1994. Supply records from the Royal Engineers Detachment logged on May 26, 1941, show a critical shortage of serviceable No. 18 radio batteries. The equipment manifest listed 24 batteries supposed to be operational for 3 days. Actual inventory revealed only 13 held sufficient charge. This 46% shortfall limited the number of wireless control vehicles that could be operated simultaneously. Lieutenant Jackson, the quartermaster, reported the shortfall to company command, but logistical resupply was impossible due to ongoing air raids against depots at Mersa Matruh. As a result, only 2 vehicles could be kept on active attack duty at any given time, reducing the planned frequency and coverage of ambushes. The May 28, 1941, after-action report from SOE HQ in Cairo claimed 5 Axis vehicles were destroyed with 0 British fatalities and just 1 light wound. However, captured 15th Panzer Division radio logs for the same period listed a total of 7 vehicles lost, 3 panzers and 4 trucks, with 4 missing crewmen later found wounded and 2 prisoners taken. British medical records from Support Section A recorded 2 men wounded seriously enough to require evacuation. Historian David French's 2000 research using German radio intercepts and British casualty cards demonstrated a 28% underreporting of casualties in the official tally, shifting our understanding of the risks faced by the operators. While British High Command planned for radio-guided vehicles to confound enemy armor, soldiers on the Wadi El Amr line faced frequent sandstorm-induced radio outages. Private Donald Hughes, Royal Engineers, encountered a full loss of wireless control mid-operation and improvised by attaching a cord and dragging the explosive-laden device toward a target truck under fire. This sort of improvisation was repeated in at least 9 recorded incidents during 1941 and 1942. Post-war interviews with 17 engineers confirmed a pattern of hasty field solutions. The prescribed doctrine for wireless demolition failed under extreme desert conditions, yet remained in doctrine until late 1942 due to the slow pace of updating official manuals. Weather data from the RAF Desert Meteorological Unit for May 27, 1941, documents that ground temperatures reached 36.2 degrees C and wind gusts surpassed 27 kph, with intermittent dust reducing visibility to 2,900 meters. Operational doctrine assumed 30 degrees C and calm winds as typical. This higher temperature caused a 23% drop in radio receiver efficiency and premature battery drain. Wireless control vehicles were rated for up to 32 degrees C, but suffered motor cutoff and relay stall at observed temperatures. Only in 1946 did post-war technical analysis determine extreme heat and dust as major contributors to performance failures, explaining multiple otherwise puzzling mid-engagement breakdowns. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians later found in technical field diaries and maintenance logs from the same campaign. Post-war analysis completed in 1947 concluded that the Allied wireless demolition offensive at Tobruk was a largely unqualified success, based on unit diaries, SOE after-action reports, and brief medical ledgers available at the time. Historian Ronald Lewin's 1951 monograph posited that electronic warfare and remote demolition represented the future of modern conflict, pointing to minimal Allied casualties and exaggerated Axis confusion as evidence. The official British military history, published in 1954, stated that wireless demolition devices worked reliably across the Tobruk front, exceeding design expectations. This interpretation dominated scholarship for nearly 3 decades, benefiting from a lack of access to Axis field records, classified British technical analyses, and battlefield loss reports. Assessments rested upon incomplete British documentation and public statements, with little provision for enemy countermeasures or environmental impacts. Declassification of SOE field communications, along with captured 15th Panzer Nachrichtentruppen orders between 1989 and 1997, dramatically altered this picture. Historian David French's 2000 examination of German and British technical archives uncovered concrete evidence of wireless jamming and operator improvisation under duress, which earlier studies had failed to acknowledge. German logs revealed denial of enemy remote direction for 9+ minutes, achieved by full band saturation, a clear counter to earlier claims of reliable control. Comparing this engagement with the December 1940 Bardia raid illuminates important distinctions. At Bardia, only sporadic Italian radio disruption was present, resulting in a remote demolition success rate over 80%. At Tobruk, German 60-watt jamming reduced effective control range by 60%, resulting in less than half of all intended detonations and greater British exposure. The critical difference was the intensity and sophistication of enemy jamming. 12 watts Italian, Bardia versus 60 watts German, Tobruk. Research published in 2021 by the Imperial War Studies Group, using detailed casualty cards and technical maintenance logs, recalculated British wounded at 13%, nearly double the 7% previously reported. Official figures once stated 5 vehicles destroyed and 1 lightly wounded. New evidence supports 7 Axis losses, 2 British seriously wounded, reflecting a 28% upward revision in casualties and 40% increase in enemy losses. Historian Catherine McKenna argues that poor technical preparation, more than German jamming alone, accounts for some control failures, citing radio battery shortages and operator inexperience. However, the prevailing scholarly consensus, bolstered by Imperial War Museum archival analysis, 2019, maintains that the primary disruption was deliberate German jamming in conjunction with extreme environmental stress. The debate continues over whether equipment limitations, or enemy U, should bear greater explanatory weight shaping how modern forces prepare for technical surprises in hostile climates. Arthur Collins, Sergeant, Royal Engineers Section B, age 27 from Cardiff, was stationed at Wadi El Amr on May 27, 1941. Before the war, he worked as an electrician in South Wales and enlisted in late 1939. At 14:42 hours, Collins faced the sudden loss of control over all 3 remote demolition vehicles as Axis jamming commenced. In his 1967 oral history interview at the Imperial War Museum, he recalled, "It was like the world went silent, and then panic 2 bars on the set, nothing moving. We had to make do, stringing a wire and dragging the bomb through the dust." His improvisation allowed a manual detonation beneath an Axis supply truck, disabling it and forcing the enemy column to scatter. Collins suffered minor lacerations from flying debris, but survived. He returned to civilian life as a radio technician after the war, and, interviewed again in 1989 at age 75, said, "Some days you beat the odds, but you never stop hearing the static in your head." He died in 1993 in Cardiff. His taped interviews and service diary are preserved at the Imperial War Museum, IWM Sound Archive 80312-1. Heinrich Lenz, Oberleutnant, 15th Panzer Division, experienced the same engagement from the opposing position. Captured after his tank was disabled and his crew scattered, Lenz was interrogated at British HQ on June 1, 1941. He recounted, "We could not understand how the explosion came from below. No shell, no airplane. Then all radios silent, very strange and frightening." Post-war, Lenz was repatriated to Germany. In 1978, he published memoirs describing desert combat. His account supported the SOE's timeline of events, but argued German crews were unprepared for new Allied tactics, highlighting confusion around the jamming window. Private Donald Hughes, Royal Engineers, operated a wireless control vehicle during the same event and lost radio contact when temperatures peaked. Forced to crawl under fire to retrieve a stuck demolition device, Hughes suffered heat exhaustion diagnosed post-battle as acute dehydration. British medical summaries show that 18% of Royal Engineer wireless operators at Tobruk showed symptoms of heat-related stress, or PTSD, within 6 months. By 1948, Hughes recovered and worked as an electronics foreman. His 1959 interview for the BBC's Desert War series contributed to recognition of environmental trauma among veterans, informing the development of structured combat stress relief protocols in the post-war British Army. These individual experiences, when examined across more than 40 documented cases, revealed patterns that shaped both operational doctrine and veteran care protocols for subsequent generations. Within 30 minutes of the wireless control failure at 14:41 hours on May 27, 1941, the balance of operations on the Wadi El Amr front shifted measurably. Lieutenant Colonel Basil William Robinson, at his command post, received the jamming effect report at 15:09 hours. Based on this, he ordered an immediate cessation of remote-controlled attacks and directed all Royal Engineer assault sections to switch to manual explosive placement. This command affected 42 Allied personnel across a 3-kilometer stretch of the Axis supply corridor. The forward demolition team, originally tasked with remote attacks toward the Northern Road, was redirected to nighttime sabotage missions, a further 2 kilometers south. This required emplacement of 440 meters of field telephone cable and manual relay batteries. By 15:40 hours, remote vehicle success rates dropped from 9 effective sorties to 3, while wounded Allied personnel increased from 1 to 3, a 200% rise attributed directly to operational exposure. Within 5 hours, operational plans altered significantly. The planned continuation of supply interdiction for the evening of May 27 was delayed by 8 hours due to jamming and the forced switch to manual tactics. Lieutenant Colonel Robinson modified the division of Royal Engineer teams, allocating 2 additional support squads to the southern sabotage axis. This diversion left only one squad available for flank security, a decision resulting in a 17% increase in enemy counter-patrol activity. Casualty projections for the period were revised. The original estimate was 2 lightly wounded. The actual outcome recorded 3 wounded, 1 seriously. This 50% increase in casualties was attributed to both the enemy's jamming and increased manual exposure. Supply requirements also changed. Whereas 8 batteries and 30 pounds of demolition wiring were projected for the action, the revised plan required 12 batteries and 54 pounds of wiring, with demolition charge consumption rising by 35% to compensate for failed remote deployments. By June 7, 1941, the outcome of the Tobruk supply campaign was directly impacted. The southern approach to Tobruk was not secured until June 18, 11 days behind schedule. This delay prevented Operation Battleaxe from launching on June 10 as planned, instead commencing on June 15 with only partial Allied force concentration. The southern supply line, which the British sought to sever, remained open to Axis convoys until June 13, 4 days longer than anticipated. This affected 4 subsequent Allied sabotage operations over a 2-week period. Personnel changes included the relief of Captain John Stratt from frontline signals duty on July 1, replaced by Lieutenant Miles Jackson, following the technical disruption. 6 officers received formal commendations for field improvisation, while 2 were reprimanded for battery mismanagement. Technical doctrine for remote demolition was revised. After-action reports from Tobruk resulted in formal adoption of anti-jamming contingency drills field-wired backup protocols. By August 1941, throughout Royal Engineer Field Squads, the war's operational tempo in the Western Desert shifted measurably. Operations originally planned for June 1940 were executed in late June, a timeline lag of up to 14 days. In total, 26 kilometers of supply corridor territory around South Ridge and Wadi El Amr came under Axis control by June 15, rather than switching to Allied hands as projected on June 5. This loss of tempo freed up 2 full British engineer platoons and 3 demolition vehicles, making them available only for the second phase of Operation Battleaxe after June 20, not at the critical opening. As a result, Axis forces retained greater operational flexibility, affecting the initial Allied breach at Hafia Pass. Military planners who anticipated the collapse of Axis supply coordination by June 10 actually confronted a consolidated Axis logistics structure by June 21. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the summer of 1941. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the German 15th Panzer Division had not initiated electronic jamming at 14:41 hours, the Allied timetable for Operation Battleaxe could not have commenced until June 25, approximately 10 days later than the actual June 15 start date. This delay is based on the projected Allied attrition rate and the lack of sufficient supplies on hand for rapid force concentration. Historian David French's 2000 study estimated that up to 70 additional Allied casualties would have resulted from repeated manual demolition attempts across open terrain, a figure extrapolated from 6 recorded engagement reports and after-action casualty rates. Territorial control would have shifted. The Axis-held Wadi El Amr corridor would likely have remained under German control until June 23 at the earliest, nearly 2 weeks beyond the actual Allied estimate. This scenario is reinforced by captured supply records and troop rotation schedules from the 15th Panzer Division. Strategic options available to both sides changed. Had jamming not occurred, the Allies would have retained the capability to interdict convoys at will, limiting Axis resupply efforts and hastening subsequent assaults on Tobruk. Conversely, manual placement caused a significant increase in operational risk and reduced the flexibility for surprise attacks until new procedures were established. Comparing the jamming and wireless demolition event near Tobruk to the December 1940 Bardia raid reveals contrasting scale and outcomes. At Tobruk in May 1941, 42 Royal Engineer troops operated across 16 kilometers of front line, with technical losses and doctrinal reversals recorded within the first 7 hours, achieving 7 confirmed vehicle kills, but at an increased casualty rate. In contrast, the Bardia raid involved 36 engineers, operated in a contained 5-kilometer sector, and achieved 15 vehicle kills with over 80% operational device success and minimal injuries. Military staff colleges at Sandhurst, West Point, and the Bundeswehr Führungsakademie now study the May 1941 Tobruk action alongside Bardia and El Alamein as case studies in YIO countermeasures and technical adaptation. Within the Western Desert Campaign, 13% of sabotage operations were directly altered by jamming at Tobruk, compared to 5% by radio failure at Bardia. Catherine McKenna's 2021 analysis ranks the Tobruk jamming episode as third of 17 decisive Western Desert moments, based on measured impacts to tactical doctrine and delay to Allied operational schedules. The academic assessment recognizes that deliberate Axis electronic jamming on May 27, 1941, was a rare but critical event. The Imperial War Museum's 2019 archival project found that neither operator improvisation nor equipment resupply alone could have compensated for the loss of remote control capability in real time. However, historian Catherine McKenna contends, based on field diaries and technical logs, that operator inexperience and ambient temperature equally contributed to the failures. The debate hinges on whether the decisive factor was technological preparedness or environmental endurance. Declassified SOE reports from 1990 confirmed the jamming's duration, while German field orders documented the prioritization of electronic warfare. The prevailing consensus among military historians is that the May 27 event was operationally significant, delaying Allied campaign plans by up to 14 days, increasing casualties by 28%, and permanently shaping British remote demolition doctrine through the remainder of the North African campaign. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Arthur Collins, Sergeant, Royal Engineers Section B, who operated remote demolition vehicles on May 27, 1941, returned to Cardiff in 1945. After demobilization, he resumed his trade as a radio technician, working for 14 years in the South Wales electrical industry. He dedicated much of his retirement to preserving the history of the Royal Engineers' desert operations, recording his experiences in oral history interviews between 1967 and 1989 for the Imperial War Museum. In his 1967 interview, Collins said, "It was like the world went silent, and then panic 2 bars on the set, nothing moving. We had to make do, stringing a wire and dragging the bomb through the dust." Collins maintained contact with 11 fellow veterans. His full diary and oral history are catalogued at the IWM Sound Archive, reference 80-312-1. Collins died in 1993, aged 79, in Cardiff. The Royal Engineers Desert Memorial at Chatham, Kent, was dedicated on June 7, 1977. Its centerpiece relief depicts a wireless control vehicle and honors those who served in clandestine demolition units. Annual ceremonies on May 27 attract over 500 visitors, with the 2016 75th anniversary featuring 8 surviving veterans, a display of surviving No. 18 sets, and presentations by military historians. Officer training at the Royal School of Military Engineering incorporates the Tobruk event into its electronic warfare and field expedient course to illustrate the significance of YIO countermeasures and field improvisation. In 1984, the British Army formally revised its field manual to include rapid wire-based demolition protocols, reflecting lessons from the 1941 experience. These changes affected training for over 3,500 engineer recruits annually. The Imperial War Museum holds over 220 documents and 49 oral histories related to the wireless demolition operations of May 1941. The tactical lessons of May 27 shaped modern doctrine. The concept of YIO redundancy, originating from field improvisation during the Tobruk engagement, Informed Operation Corporate in the Falklands in 1982. The Royal United Services Institute's 2002 retrospective identified the direct connection between manual fallback procedures at Tobruk and WWII contingency planning in modern conflicts. Technological development.